Hi, my name is Charles Mason, and today in this short video, I'll tell you a life-changing story about how I figured out how to easily create a miniature home power plant so ingenious it has the power to permanently provide any family around the world with an endless supply of green, cheap electricity you can use on demand for pennies on the dollar. In fact, over the past year, over 57,347 people have also already successfully used the very same technique to get over tragic milestones such as hurricanes, snowstorms, or floods. Based on a technology that NASA's Glenn Research Center is spearheading the development for both space and terrestrial use, not only can this simple device provide you with enough electricity to keep your home warm, cozy, and comfortable during the longest, harshest winters, regardless of how cold it gets outside, it can save 80% or more on your power bill every month. I'm sure you're already intrigued and you want to know all about how this system works. Honestly, it's like nothing you've ever seen. And in 5 minutes from now, you'll be outraged that you put a single penny into the golden coffers of the greedy power corporations that make the cards these days. So you absolutely need to watch this short presentation today while it's still up. I don't know how much longer I'll have this free presentation online, so watch this right now while you still can. Before we continue, let me tell you who I am and how it all started. As I mentioned, my name is Charles Mason. I'm no electrical engineer. I'm no scientist. I'm no professor at Berkeley's. I'm just like you, an average Joe. I'm a 43-year-old fire truck driver, and I live about an hour outside of Sacramento, California, with my beautiful family. I have looked after the people in my region and kept them and their homes safe for the last 7 years. I have been there when the Camp Fire destroyed everything in 2018, and also protected my community in 2013 from the Rim Fire. And I pretty much have an idea of how things can turn really bad really quick, just like a fire can ruin everything in a blink. And that's exactly what happened to our family. My really personal and somewhat embarrassing story began a few years ago when we were blessed to have our second child, Emma. We were living a happy life and were full of the joys of spring, and like everyone else, taking our bare necessities for granted. In the autumn of 2019, however, all of that changed. We had no idea the calm day would turn into a gut-wrenching crisis that drove me to tears. We'd just been hit with the first major wildfires of the season, with blazes ravaging both the north and south of the state. Now, that's nothing out of the norm for California in October, but this time it was different. Tuesday, the state's biggest utility company decided to flip the switch and turn out the power to 2 million people, including us, with barely any notice. By the time I got to the supermarket, the shelves were practically stripped bare. All of the flashlights, batteries, water, and strangely all the baby products were gone. The hardware store was also out of everything. Everyone was in search of a generator. It was mad chaos. And to make matters worse, my wife had absolutely no way to continue pumping and storing her precious breast milk for our daughter. I tried calling the electric company on my cell phone to find out when power would be restored, but all I got was a pre-recorded message saying that they were aware of the problem and that it could be between 48 and 72 hours before power would be back online. Unsure what to do and feeling helpless to protect my family, I went to the bedroom to see if Linda and the girls were okay. But what happened next made me freeze in my tracks. She was laying on our bed, swaying and shushing our daughter, desperately trying to calm her down. And she was in total shock, shivering and shaking uncontrollably. Tears of desperation madly ran down her cheeks. I could see the fear in her eyes, thinking about risking the loss of something very, very important to the baby, her liquid gold. I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed what I realized to be our last portion of milk from our already thawed-out freezer, and wrapped my arms around her in a futile attempt to assure her I will find a way out of this crisis. And that's when she said the words that made my heart stop. "The baby," she said. "She won't stop crying. She's hungry." As I was preparing the baby bottle, I saw now how her heart sank as dark thoughts were rushing through her mind. Linda looked at me, and in sorrow she said something I'm sure I'll never forget. "It's your fault. The baby will starve because you did nothing to protect us." Hearing those words from the mouth of the woman I loved was the single most devastating moment of my life. I felt like my world collapsed. I felt powerless because there was nothing I could do to protect the ones I cared for most. I was mad at the power company and authorities that I trusted to keep us safe for all these years, and I felt angry for putting my family in this position in the first place. I decided right then and there that I would never put my wife and daughters in a similar situation again. When the power finally came back on, I dusted myself off and immediately began researching every single energy alternative I could find, because clearly relying on the power company for the security and comfort of my family just wasn't an option anymore. Not only did their power lines always seem to go down during even the smallest weather events, but they'd been absolutely price gouging me for more than a decade, and laughing all the way to the bank as they scooped thousands of hard-earned dollars right out of my pocket. So I began to immediately look at alternatives that would help my family escape Big Electric's monopoly on our safety. I considered buying a bigger, newer, heavy-duty generator, but to get a really good, high-quality generator, something that could provide enough energy for my entire home, I was looking at $1,000 investment minimum. And with the current cost of gas, that was as good as committing financial suicide. So realizing a generator wasn't a real option, I began looking at solar power. But to have panels professionally installed would have cost me $12,000, money I certainly didn't have lying around. And trying to get a DIY solar kit also seemed pointless, because not only did they cost anywhere from $500 to $1,000, almost every review I read online said that they rarely produced even 20% of the energy that their manufacturers advertised. There was really only one option left for me. If I wanted to make sure my family will never go through such an experience again and get us 100% off the grid, I'd need to do everything I can to create my own power. It had to be something cheap and fast and easy to build, without a bunch of complicated parts or technical skills required. So I locked myself into my study, sat down in my favorite chair, and decided to use my noggin and find a solution. I had to start thinking outside the box. For almost a month I frenetically read everything that could be found on the internet. I buried myself into countless pages, studies, and forums. I spoke to researchers, scientists, professors, and even university students for advice, but there was nothing new under the sun. All the stuff I could find was either confusing or downright worthless. Many sleepless nights passed, and I was getting tired of surfing the internet for a simple solution. I felt like I'd hit a brick wall, and I was close to giving up. That night I prayed to God for a miracle, and I know He heard me, because that very next day I struck gold. In an almost forgotten piece of transportation history, an obscure public transportation vehicle that saw service in Switzerland, Zaire, and Belgium during the 1950s, which used the flywheel technology as its main power source. The simplest invention, which ironically used the most misunderstood or enigmatic thing in the universe, gravity. That very moment I realized the answer I was looking for was in front of my eyes. You're probably thinking there's no way such a simple thing like the flywheel could hold the key to green, cheap electricity. Think about it for a second and you'll quickly understand why. When spun up, a flywheel becomes a reservoir for a massive amount of kinetic energy, which can be stored or drawn back out at will. The capabilities of such a device are as extraordinary as its unique design. In fact, recently, NASA Glenn Research Center has been involved in the development of this technology for space and terrestrial applications, and publications ranging from Wired Magazine to Discover describe this technology as the next major source of clean power. The true secret of this energy is that it is so simple to obtain, and the fundamentals are so easy, yet few know this secret, and it is rarely used. So if properly applied, it can produce insane amounts of energy. You essentially have an incredibly potent, completely untapped power source just sitting right in front of you. And as I started really crunching the numbers, I realized that just maybe this technology held the key to the energy independence I was after. So I began spending every waking hour thinking of the best way to build this myself. I had a pretty good idea of the science behind, but what I didn't know was exactly how to capture that energy or easily convert it to green, cheap electricity I could use on the spot. So I called my brother-in-law Tim, who was one of the best engineers I have ever met, told him what I was trying to accomplish, shared the humiliating circumstances behind why this was so important to me, and asked him if he could help me draft the blueprints for this simple generator. Fortunately, Tim is a pretty good guy and a family man himself, and as an engineer, he's also the kind of person who loves a hard problem to solve. So every day after work, Tim and I got together and worked on this project. We both knew that whatever we came up with had to be incredibly cheap to construct, and I was also adamant that our system needs to be very easy to build, so that if, God forbid, something was to happen to me, my family could make one without any problem whatsoever. The first prototypes we made were either too expensive or way too complicated. We had some heated arguments, mainly because of me being stubborn. I needed the system to be cheap and simple. But finally, after more than 2 months and more than 7 discarded variations, we finally came up with a prototype that seemed to be what we were looking for. The design was brilliant, and we managed to build it with around $200 worth of materials from Home Depot. However, I'm sure we could have found some parts at a junkyard for free if we weren't in a rush. But the most important part is that it was incredibly safe. There was no fire, no dangerous fumes released, no worry about creating a dangerous reaction. Instead, you simply had to place the components in the correct position, and because of the ingenious way the device was designed, it generated an extraordinary amount of energy, which was then captured and converted into usable electricity. Even more, the system was actually incredibly easy to hook up to your home's current energy source, even if you're terrible at building stuff and have trouble plugging in a DVD player to your TV. The next step was to test it out and see if it really worked as well as we thought it would. So we started the device, and I stood watching in complete amazement. The system reached optimum performance because of the brilliant design Tim had come up with. It was providing a steady, robust supply of electricity right into my home. I could hardly contain my excitement of what we had accomplished, of not just having all the electricity we needed to run our refrigerator, the dishwasher, the TV, and all the lights in our home with no problem whatsoever, but also the insurance this would give us should disaster hit. In truth, I almost couldn't believe how simple all of this was. It ran perfectly. For the total month of January, we ran heat at 77 degrees and used the same amount of electricity that we always did before, but rather than pay $250 for our energy bill like we did in the past, our cost was less than $25. All it had taken me was about 2 hours of my time and about $200 in initial costs, and my family became energy independent. I love the fact that I was teaching my family such a great lesson about not being dependent on the government or any corporations for their safety, and I felt so relieved to know they will always grow in a warm, safe, and comfortable home. Now, that was a few years ago, and since then we've saved hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on the electric bill. And this holds true both in the coldest winter months, when the temperature can get down into the -10s, as well as the hottest, muggiest days of summer, when the thermometer soars past 100. Plus, once I made some tweaks to the system, I managed to squeeze even more power, enough to never worry about being energy dependent again. Well, before long, my friends and family members were begging to know my secret. And when I showed them the simple, clever home power plant I'd created, a lot of them had a hard time believing something so small could be generating energy on demand. But after I'd given them the simple building instructions that I'd come up with, and they'd followed them and created their own home power plant in about the time it takes to assemble an IKEA chair, they became believers fast. And the results were the same over and over, an abundance of clean, easy energy that they could use to power their entire home, pumping as much heat as they wanted during the winter, blasting the AC during the summer, running their TVs, their kitchen lights, their garage doors, their most heavy-duty appliances, and not paying a single penny to do it. Soon my friends were telling their friends about my little personal home power plant, until finally the number of phone calls and emails from people asking me to share the blueprints with them became so overwhelming, My wife put her foot down and told me that I had to find a better way to share this life-saving knowledge with the world. So I went to work, writing out the blueprints, the materials list, and making a follow-along guide showing the construction process in simple steps. And that's how the Home Power Shield was created. It's the only proven, exclusive step-by-step program showing you exactly how to create your own home power plant today and how to drastically slash your monthly electric bill by 50%, 80%, or more from the very first month. And it's been specifically created so that anyone with one hand can do it. As long as you understand how to turn a screwdriver and can somewhat speak English, you can set up the system no problem. In fact, you'll be shocked by how few steps there actually are, and how short the list of materials you need to build this is. Inside this system, which I'll tell you how you can access in just a second, you'll see exactly what those steps are, along with professionally designed blueprints that will help you build the system from start to finish. Even though it wasn't cheap for me to conceive this system, I put a lot of time, money, and effort into it. I think it's extremely valuable because once you have it, you simply just look over my shoulder and copy exactly what I do. And the Home Power Shield will be finished before you realize it. Plus, because this program is something that you can download to your computer, tablet, or smartphone, you'll be able to follow it and use it from anywhere. Even if you decide to build your system down in the garage or outside, you'll be given guides and written instructions detailing exactly how to connect your system to your home electric box, so that within 15 minutes of finishing your system, you have a constant, non-stop stream of energy pumping through your home. All of the materials you need to build this will cost $200 total. But if you have a junkyard in your town, you can probably find about 90% of those materials for free. Additionally, you're also going to be given a full list of tools, and you'll see exactly how to use each one to build the device so that you have an unrestricted amount of electricity inside your home. You will never have to pay a single cent to the greedy electric companies again. And on top of that, the Home Power Shield is virtually maintenance-free. There's no fire, no burning, no dangerous gases being released, which means there are no intense mechanical processes that can break down. Instead, you simply start the device and enjoy a fully powered home. To date, more than 57,000 families have used this exact same system to permanently ditch their energy suppliers. I was paying through the nose for electricity, and now I'm energy independent, and it's only been about 70 days since I got the Home Power Shield blueprints. Brian Harris from Austin, Texas. I've been absolutely blown away. This is a must-have for every family. I especially loved the follow-along guide. At every step, I felt like you were right there with me to guide me. If someone like me who's never built anything before can do this in less than 2 hours without a problem, anyone can. Amazing.